Hello, my name is Brett Fairbairn, and this video about the Antigonish Movement is available for your use under a Creative Commons license that allows you to share it freely as long as you attribute it to its source, the Centre for the Study of Cooperatives at the University of Saskatchewan. The Antigonish Movement was a famous adult education movement in Atlantic Canada between the World Wars. It's one of the most fascinating and inspiring stories in the history of cooperative development. It represents an amazing example of how adult education can be a tool to organize communities to meet their own needs through cooperatives. The key to the Antigonish movement was the activities of a pair of social crusaders, I suppose, of priests, Roman Catholic priests, by the name of Jimmy Tompkins and Moses Cody. Father Tompkins and Father Cody became associated with the Extension Department at St. Francis Xavier University, located in the town of Antigonish, Nova Scotia, which gave its name to the movement that they started. Tompkins had become involved in working with poor and excluded and marginalized communities in Nova Scotia in the 1920s, so working with fishers and with farmers to mobilize them around their needs and to improve their living conditions. With the onset of the Great Depression and with the creation of the Extension Department at St. Francis Xavier, Tompkins and Cody had a platform to do something truly remarkable. They set about going to the small towns, to the communities in rural Nova Scotia and then more widely across Atlantic Canada, and they organized the people to do something about the economic challenges that they faced. One of the key techniques that was used by the Antigonish movement was the study club. And following a community meeting in which Tompkins or Cody or another extension speaker would lay out the challenges and the possibilities for community action, local residents would come together and meet in study clubs that might congregate in a kitchen, that would study materials sent out to them from the Extension Department at the university, and would learn about the economy, would learn about cooperatives, and would begin to formulate plans for their own community. In this way, groups of local citizens came together, educated themselves, identified their own goals and their own priorities, and in many cases, what they determined to do and what they did successfully was to create cooperative enterprises. One of the keys to the Antigonish movement was the creation of credit unions. Credit unions were a relatively new idea in the 1930s in Canada, and they offered a way for people to pool their resources in a small community and to help each other to improve their lives and to improve their businesses. In order to spread ideas like this, the help of many people was needed. The clergy played a role, not just Tompkins and Cody, but other priests in Atlantic Canada. Civil servants played a role to help draft legislation and to help legitimate some of the new models that were being created. But with the help of these allies, the fishing folk and the farming folk of Nova Scotia and Atlantic Canada began to create hundreds of new enterprises. Within 4 months of legislation being passed for credit unions in 1932, the first 4 were created. By the end of 1935, there were 29. By 1945, there were over 400 credit unions in Atlantic Canada. And it wasn't just credit unions. Dozens of consumer co-ops were created, and farmers formed a marketing cooperative for livestock. There was a United Maritime Fishermen Cooperative, fish processing plants, a fruit cooperative and fruit processing plants, so a multifaceted regional movement for economic development in depressed rural areas. This was supported by a whole variety of activities. Cody's radio broadcasts inspired people. People tuned in and listened to his speeches on the radio in the 1930s and the 1940s. The movement founded a newspaper, the Maritime Cooperator, later the Atlantic Cooperator, that was published and distributed widely across the region. So new technologies, new media, and new methods of adult education were employed to support the study clubs and the activities in local communities. Hundreds of cooperatives, cooperatives that improved the lives of people across the region, owe their origin to the Antigonish movement, but not just in Atlantic Canada, because the movement became famous throughout the world. Speakers went across Canada, across North America, eventually to other parts of the world to spread the idea of the Antigonish movement and the idea that people could help themselves by educating themselves. It became an inspiring model that Canada offered to the world, and people from Africa, from Asia, from many countries and regions learned about Antigonish and attempted to apply the same principles in their home countries. What the Antigonish movement shows, most of all, is the idea that cooperatives are intimately bound up with adult education, with people improving their skills and their knowledge, learning to do the things that they can do to address their own needs and their own challenges. The Antigonish movement also illustrates how cooperatives are inherently part of the idea of community development, the development of the skills and capacity of the community to address its own needs.